This conference will now be recorded.
Minimize this for myself. Oops. Oops. Oh, 1 second. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Hannah, and I am a park ranger in Duluth at the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center. I started as a UMD student in an internship program and have been here for almost 2 years now. Today, we are going to see the journey domestic, but mostly international vessels take to get to the ocean from Duluth and how it's all possible. I understand that there are many who don't know anything about how vessels get to the ocean from Duluth, and I'm going to do my best at explaining everything that matters. And if there are any questions, please type them in the chat as soon as you think of them, and I will do my best to answer them when the time is appropriate. So, what is the St. Lawrence Seaway? Getting specific, there is the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway that goes as far west as Duluth, Minnesota. Let me get my little laser pointer out, located right over here, and as far east as the Gulf of St. Lawrence, right over here, leading to the Atlantic Ocean. The St. Lawrence Seaway, however, comprises of the Welland Canal, as well as a number of other locks that stretch until the St. Lambert Lock, located right about here. So, like I said, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway is basically this entire photograph, and then the St. Lawrence Seaway is this highlighted section right here. Both systems work to let boats from the United States and Canada load and deliver large amounts of cargo to ports located everywhere within it. The Seaway also allows for international ships to deliver their cargoes from countries all over the world as far inland as Duluth. So, how is the travel made possible? Well, it is made possible thanks to the rivers and lakes that naturally exist, and the canals and locks that were created to make transportation between the lakes and ocean possible. For me to gauge where everyone is in their understanding, I'm going to ask some questions here and there on some things before we talk about them. So first, if anyone can answer this question, please do so. What type of vessels leave Duluth for the ocean? If anyone knows that. I cannot see the chat, actually. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Anybody? Anybody? That's okay. I'll go on to the next slide. Salties. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Salties. Oh, oopsies. There we go. We call them salties. So what are salties? Salties are ocean-going ships. Salties are ocean-going ships that travel internationally, going wherever their orders take them. A lot of the newer salty models are built specifically not only to operate on the sea, but also to spend a great deal of time in service within the Great Lakes. What is a canal? A canal is a man-made waterway that allows boats and ships to pass from one body of water to another. So keyword there is man-made. Canals are man-made connections between one body of water to another. An example of this that many folks are familiar with is the Duluth Canal. Before this canal was created, the way to connect the lake and the harbor was going through the way to, gosh, what am I doing? Before the canal was created, the way that the canal and the harbor and the lake were connected was through Superior's natural entry, but that was not a fast and a quick way for vessels to get into Duluth side of the harbor. So to make things easier for ships, the canal was dug to connect the Duluth Superior Harbor to Lake Superior. Here we have a quick visual of where the twin ports are in relation to one another. As you can see right over here, we have the Duluth Canal, and then right over there we have the Superior natural entry. So just to make sure everyone is on the same page, the Duluth Canal connects what to what? Anyone would like to participate in the comments? Be much appreciated. Can you screen presentation?
Lake Superior to Duluth Harbor.
Okay. Well, Thank you for the comments. But the Duluth Canal connects the Duluth Superior Harbor to Lake Superior. So what is a lock? A lock is a device that is used to raise and lower vessels between two bodies of water on rivers and in canals. This results in the change of water level to which the vessel is at. Essentially, a lock is a water elevator. Locks lift vessels up to the higher canal water level when headed one way, and when headed in the opposite direction, they take vessels down to the lower water level.
Yep.
The majority of this is all done using gravity. Are there any questions so far on anything that we've discussed? I understand that there might not be. It is pretty soon. And if there aren't any questions, again, go ahead and type them in whenever you want. Next time there is a space to answer, I'll just give it a few more seconds. Okay, I'm just going to continue forward. So where does our journey begin? Our journey is going to begin here in Duluth, right there. Salties arrive in Duluth from all over the world. Many fly flags from countries like the Netherlands, Liberia, Antigua, Barbados, the Bahamas, Cyprus, Hong Kong, and Malta, and the Marshall Islands. All salties make their way here, as in Duluth, the only way they can, through the Great Lakes St Lawrence Seaway. This is all made possible with the assistance of Great Lakes certified pilots. These pilots are individuals who have had years of experience on the Great Lakes and are certified to operate vessels on them. Think of it as a license. While there are individuals on salty ships who are qualified to operate on the ocean with their license, that license doesn't qualify them to operate without assistance on any of the Great Lakes, unlike the Great Lakes pilots. So we know salties from all over the world arrive in Duluth from the Great Lakes St Lawrence Seaway with the help of the pilots. But what do they bring, and what do they take? The cargo they bring in most frequently are wind turbine blades and towers, at least to Duluth. Following behind that, they also unload clay, cement, project equipment, and mining equipment. Unless they are leaving empty, which does happen, the cargoes they take with them are almost always wheat and grain. But they may also leave with cargoes like bentonite clay, canola seed, and beet pulp pellets. Those are very common. A small note to make is that despite their registered country, it isn't necessarily where the cargo is going, and it isn't necessarily where the ship or crew are from, but whose laws the ship or crew follow. After leaving Duluth, the ship will travel around 350 miles as they cross Lake Superior. These trips are between 23 and 25 hours usually until they get to their next stop. Here we have a simplified profile of our journey to the ocean, laid out real nice for us, showing what the elevation is above sea level and then what the deepest points are within the lakes. But so the Sault Locks, or Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, is where we are headed next. As you can see, the salties that come to Duluth must climb about 600 feet of water over some 2,300 miles from the sea. Here goes another map where we have a picture of all the Great Lakes. This red star, boop, right there, if you haven't already guessed, is Duluth, and the yellow one over here is the Sault Locks, right underneath my little red mark. So I'm going to be showing photos like these periodically, just so everyone has a clear understanding of where we're going and where we've been. So Sault Ste. Marie, where is it and what happens there? Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is located at the end of Lake Superior. Sault Ste. Marie is where the Sault Locks are located, which are in control of all vessels that enter and exit Lake Superior. So how did the Sault Locks get started? Before any locks were built, cargoes had to be unloaded, hauled over land, and then reloaded onto other ships back and forth from Lake Superior to the St. Mary's River. This process is called portaging, and as you can tell by this list here, there have been quite a few additions to the locks. The first lock was built by the Canadians in 1796, which, by the way, is not listed on the slide. It was only able to transport small boats like canoes, but was destroyed in the War of 1812 by American soldiers. After it was destroyed, they had to resort back to portaging. But in 1855, the state of Michigan built 2 new locks known as the state locks. They were 350 feet long, 70 feet wide, and 12 feet in depth. After these state locks were built, the federal government took over for Michigan and constructed the Weitzel Lock, which was 515 feet long, 80 feet wide, and 17 feet in depth. After the Weitzel Lock came the first Poe Lock, which replaced the original state locks. Then the Davis and Saban Lock were built in 1914 and 1919. Following that, the MacArthur Lock was built in 1943, which replaced the Weitzel Lock, and after the second Poe Lock was built in 1968. And finally, the second Poe Lock was built in 1968, replacing the original Poe Lock. The Poe Lock being the last lock to have finished construction. Despite there being 4 locks, the only one, or I should say the one mainly used by Lakers today, is the Poe Lock. This is because the Davis and Saban locks are closed and the MacArthur Lock isn't large enough for all vessels. The Poe Lock is 1,200 feet in length and 110 feet in width, which is perfect as the largest of the vessels on the Great Lakes. The Paul Archer Girtha is 1,014 feet in length, and it gets through just fine. In the summer of 2020, phase 1 of the construction of the new lock began with dredging the approach of the future lock. The yet-to-be-named lock is expected to be completed by 2030 and will be the same size as the Poe Lock. The reason for the new lock is because if the Poe Lock were to suddenly become inoperable, the nation's iron ore access would be suddenly slowed. Before we continue, are there any questions in the chat so far?
I don't see any questions yet, but if you have any, feel free to type them in. We'll wait a moment so that we can respond. There is a question that says, is there a charge to lock through?
Actually, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I was hoping that my research had given me most of the answers. I don't believe there is any. Yeah, okay, no charge, that's right. I don't believe there is, and the reason why is because the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does run it, and honestly, if boats weren't able to move through, we really wouldn't be making money. The government would. I'll touch on that later a little bit, but do you envision the construction of the new observation? Do I envision the construction of a new observation tower for the new lock? I don't know. I don't really know what that question means. Is there going to be an observation tower if that's the question? I don't know, but they pay. Okay. No, there is no. No, there is not. Someone else has answered these questions for me. Thank you, Virtual Visitor Center. Is the new lock to replace an existing lock? Yes, I should have clarified that, excuse me. The new lock is going to, I'll actually go back a slide so that there is a visual. But if you guys look right over here, this is what we currently have right now up here, but down here is what we are looking to have. This is something that was just generated, but this is the new lock. It's going to be replacing the Saban and the Davis lock. All right, if there aren't going to be any more questions, I'm just going to wait a few more seconds. I'm sorry, I was doing a really bad job at answering the Woodlock questions too. I did not. I focused all of my time and research elsewhere. All right, I'm going to continue just forward. Again, if there are more questions, even if it is about all of this stuff, I will answer them later. Okay, going forward. Questions. So from the Sioux down the St. Mary's River, it will take vessels between 4 and 5 hours from when they leave the Sioux locks until they get to Lake Huron. From the end of the St. Mary's River, it takes a vessel between 14 and 16 hours to travel 200 miles across Lake Huron and to the mouth of the St. Clair River. From there, the vessels, vessels travel down to the St. Clair Lake before it enters Detroit River. And then here we have, so right over here is where Sault Ste. Marie is located. They travel down, right over here is the St. Mary's River. After they exit the St. Mary's River, going through Lake Huron, where they enter through the St. Clair River, pass through the St. Clair Lake, and then enter into the Detroit River. Okay, another quick check-in. Our journey to the sea thus far, we have left Duluth, been through Lake Superior. The first set of locks traveled the St. Mary's River, down Lake Huron, and we just passed through the St. Clair River and Lake. Next, we are entering the Detroit River, and so far we have gone down 29 feet in elevation. Not really that much considering how much farther we've got to go. And another reference point for those not familiar with the Great Lakes area. Here goes everything from Duluth, Sault Ste. Marie, Detroit River. The Detroit River and area has always been busy. Before Europeans, the Detroit River had been used for hundreds of years as a mode of travel for the native populations. The Detroit River and the surrounding area allowed for easy travel, hunting, gathering, living, and trading with other groups nearby. Once the Dutch and French inserted themselves into the area became a key point in the fur trade. Essentially, the areas along and around the Detroit River developed because of what the river allowed humans to accomplish. Some quick facts I thought I could share with you guys about the river is that in 1679, the Griffin passed through the Detroit River and eventually the lake and river of St. Clair. And for those who don't know, Le Griffin, or the Griffin, is famous for being the first European ship to sail the upper Great Lakes and the first to presumably sink. After the Erie Canal was made in 1817, the Detroit River became the means of travel to people looking to settle down in the area. This all led to a population boom. The Detroit River was also used to guarantee freedom to blacks enslaved by slavery. By crossing the river, they would be protected under Canadian immigration laws. The river was also used to transport alcohol from Windsor, Ontario to Michigan. 3 years before alcohol was legal across the United States, the state of Michigan actually became a temperance state. When the river wasn't frozen, boats would travel back and forth with alcohol, and when the river was frozen, cars would attempt to drive across the ice, which resulted in a lot of cars being lost due to the ice not being able to support the weight of cars filled with cases of alcohol. So, traveling the Detroit River is about 32 miles long from Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie. Trips straight through can take anywhere between 2 hours and 2 hours and 45 minutes. So after vessels leave Lake St. Clair, they must travel the Detroit River. First, the vessels travel through the Fleming Shipping Channel, just south of Belle Isle. Then, as it continues, the vessels pass under the Ambassador Bridge. The Ambassador Bridge is the main bridge that connects Detroit, Michigan to Windsor, Ontario. So right here, leaving the St. Clair River, they pass underneath Belle Isle, continuing down here, passing underneath the Ambassador Bridge and then continuing. After passing into the bridge, they will continue south into the Fighting Island Shipping Channel, still headed south of the Detroit River, still heading south on the Detroit River, of course. The vessel will pass Fighting Island, Grassy Island, and Grosse Isle. The Fighting Channel eventually turns into the Livingstone Channel, which takes vessels straight into Lake Erie. So here we have the Fighting Channel heading south, continuing. Right here is where it turns into the Livingstone Channel, and then here I've got two different aerial photos showing just a little bit of a different visual perspective. From the edge of the Detroit River through Lake Erie to Port Colborne, vessels travel between 14 and 17 hours for about 200 miles before they meet their next destination. And now I'm going to take another moment for some questions. Let's see. What can you tell us about the Livingstone Channel? Can't tell you much other than the name. if I were to go back just a few slides, Livingstone Channel is right here. I know it's maintained, and I know that it's in a way technically a little bit of a canal, as they kind of do have it mildly walled off right over here. Tom, you were asking some really good questions and making me look bad. Are there any other questions? Oh, nope, that's no question. Again, I'll just take a few more moments. Grade 5-6 class. How many people generally travel on each boat? Grade 5-6 class. Terminology I'm not familiar with. If you're talking like how many crew are usually, okay, yeah. Yeah, if you're talking like how many crew are usually on board, yeah, between 20 and 25. I was gonna say 22, 23. Can the full-size Lakers like the Jugurtha go that far? Yes, they can go that far. So like I mentioned earlier when I was mentioning the Sioux locks, how large the current PO lock is. It is 1,200 feet long, and it is able to accommodate the Pollard Jugurtha, which is only 1,014 feet. I'll talk about the limitations in size as we get to the Welland Canal, because that's where it matters a little more. What is a triangular looking thing on the island that sort of looks like an Illuminati on the last slide? Oh, Marty Floor corrected me. It's the Livingston, no E. I believe I kept saying the Livingstone. That is my bad. But triangle looking thing, Illuminati. If you're talking about this little mass of land, I'm not really sure. I'm not gonna be able to answer that question. If there aren't any more questions, I am going to continue. Oh, I understand now. Were you guys talking about this little triangle thing? This is Grosse Isle is actually like a really nice park. They have they have a zoo there, an aquarium. It's really beautiful. I recommend folks looking it up. Okay, anyway, I am going to be continuing. If you guys do have more questions, go ahead and put them in and I will answer them next chance I get. So past the Detroit River and across Lake Erie, we have lowered another few feet with a total of 31.9 feet, or about 32. Again, when I do mention the elevation, so it does fluctuate based on the water levels across all of the Great Lakes, but generally, if we're talking general numbers, we have lowered about 32 feet. Here goes another reference photo of the journey thus far as we arrived to the Welland Canal. Left Duluth, went through the Sioux, went through Lake St. Clair River, St. Clair Lake, and the Detroit River, and we have crossed Lake Erie, and now we are arriving to the Welland Canal. The length of the Welland Canal spans from Port Colborne in Lake Erie to Port Weller in Lake Ontario. There are roughly 3,000 vessels every year that travel through all 8 locks, which stretch over 27 miles through Ontario, Canada. There have been a total of 4 versions of the Welland. Sorry, I was going to meet that. There have been, excuse me, where was I? There have been a total of 4 versions of the Welland Canal since the first groundbreaking in 1824. The first version was completed in 1829 with dimensions of 110 feet in length, 22 feet in width, and 8 feet in depth. It included 40 wooden locks in order to adjust for the 327-foot difference between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So basically, in order to get from Lake Ontario to Lake Ontario from Lake Erie, we have to lower 327 feet. The first canal never proved economically feasible to run, however, and relied heavily on government loans and subsidies during its 15 years of operation. And because the locks were made from wood, they needed to be replaced every 10 years. So on top of it not bringing in any money at all, it was very costly. The private company who owned it did decide to sell it to the government in 1841. In 1842, the government began working on the second version of the Welland Canal, with work being completed in 1845. The new canal and locks were built with stone, and the size of the locks increased. This time, there were 27 locks built, with 23 locks being 150 feet in length, 27 feet in width, and 9 feet in depth, while the other 4 were built to allow ships up to 200 feet long and 45 feet wide. The second canal was used until about 1915, despite being replaced in 1881. After the construction of the third lock, the second was still very useful to various company owners and customers that lived in the city center, with deliveries of raw materials and the dispatch of their own product elsewhere. Construction on the third canal began in 1872 as the need to be able to allow larger boats to travel between Lake Erie and Ontario was getting bigger. Finished in 1881, the third canal had larger locks, and the route was different, as instead of following the natural waterways like the last two had, this one went through land, cut straight through land that had never I don't want to say never been done before, but it went straight to the land despite the past where they would follow the natural waterways. This time they had one less lock, and the dimensions grew to 270 feet in length, 45 feet in width, and 14 feet in depth. And it was the shortest of all routes, only being about 23 miles long. And if anyone would like to answer in the comment section, could you guys remember how many locks are in the current Welland Canal, and about how many vessels travel through it every year? I briefly mentioned it. I hope somebody remembered. Well, 3, 2, 8 locks. Yes, 8 locks in the Welland Canal. Yep, there are 8 locks, and about 3,000 vessels go. Yeah, and about 3,000 vessels every year travel through the Welland Canal. Today's Welland Canal was completed in 1932. They had begun in 1913, but had to put construction on hold due to World War I, and there not being enough men to build it, as they say. There are 8 locks through the now concrete canal, with 7 out of the 8 having dimensions of 859 feet in length, 80 feet in width, and 25.5 feet in depth. Because of these dimensions, vessels larger than 740 feet in length are not able to cross from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario or vice versa. So bringing back up the question that was asked earlier, basically any of the 1,000-footers that a lot of folks are fans of, they can never go into Lake Ontario, and it is because of the size restrictions of the Welland Canal. So in order for boats to get to and from or able to be use the Welland Canal at all, they have to be either 740 feet or less. If you look when heading north up the Welland Canal, the elevation starts right over here at about 574 feet above sea level, and over the next 8 locks, the elevation is lowered by 328 feet to Lake Ontario's elevation of about 246 feet above sea level. And this is them heading north. Coming in from Port Colborne, vessels pass under a lift bridge as they approach Lock 8. Up top, right over here, where I had this little arrow, I will have it marked for you all on every slide so that you kind of understand where we are. Past the lift bridge, Lock 8 lowers vessels down by only a few feet. What makes this lock so unique is that it is the longest lock within the Welland Canal, with dimensions of 1,148 feet in length by 80 feet in width, and that is only the guard lock. After being lowered just a few feet, only about 2 vessels continue as they approach the Welland bypass. So again, taking another tiny little step back, when I did talk about the uniform, like large boats cannot get to and from, I know that the reason why they do have this lock's dimension so large at 1,148 feet is because there are just some larger boats that they want to get mildly passed through, as there used to be at least ports available. I'm pretty sure that there still are for some larger boats to get to, but they, again, could not pass all the way through. Cannot pass still. But prior to the bypass, vessels followed the blue arrow/yellow line, which took vessels through the city of Welland. This had been the case for every canal since the second canal, when the route began going through the city in 1845. The Welland bypass was made in 1973 to help the city's traffic congestion that would happen on busy days when public transport could be delayed by as much as 30 minutes. Just like here in Duluth, for those that live here or have ever visited, when the lift bridge goes up, it can stay up for at least 15 minutes. And that could really add up, especially when there are multiple bridges in the city of Welland. The green arrow along the red line shows the bypass, which lets vessels travel much quicker as the speed can pick up to 8 knots rather than the usual 6 knots everywhere else. As they continue north, vessels will pass under Bridge 11, also known as the Allenberg Bridge, before they arrive to the 7th lock. The 7th lock will lower or lift vessels about 43 feet. And a fun fact is that the 7th lock was the first lock within the Welland Canal to have a vacuum mooring. This is when vacuum pads are mounted on vertical rails to help keep a vessel steady as it is raised and lowered in a lock chamber. And I do know that they now all have vacuum mooring pads. Past lock 7, we approach locks 6 through 4. These 3 stand out compared to the rest in the Welland Canal, as all 3 are twin flight locks, meaning there are a total of 6 locks, and each side is able to take care of vessel traffic moving either up or down the canal. Going down all 3 locks, vessels are lowered 144 feet until they're at 384 feet above sea level. It's been some 40 slides since we've talked about how a lock operates, so I'm just going to retouch it again because it's a little tricky for some folks. But this GIF is a helpful visual, but gravity is what the locks in the Welland Canal use to lift and lower vessels as to their needed height. As you can see, the filling valve right over here is open, meaning the water in the gated area will be the same level as the top area. And when the gates are closed, as well as the filling valve, the emptying valve is opened, and surprise, it empties the water within the gates to the level of the water, the lower level of water. It evens itself out, basically. And here goes another visual. I hope it's not too much of an overkill. I did use this earlier, but I feel like it's a nice visual. Shows vessels going both ways. So post locks 6 through 4, vessels pass under another lift bridge called the Glendale Bridge before they approach lock 3. Here they're lowered about 46 feet before they continue their way, passing two drawbridges before they get to the 2nd lock. At the 2nd lock, vessels are at the 2nd lock, vessels are lowered roughly 46 feet, same as the previous lock, and then they will continue to lock 1. Right over here, they have a dam too. Both locks actually both have dams. I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But lock 1 marks the end of their northbound journey in the Welland Canal for vessels. Once again, and for the last time, they're lowered 46 feet as they enter the harbor and leave the Welland Canal through Port Weller into Lake Ontario. Are there any questions for me?
Yes, we have a couple from earlier.
Okay, I'm going to scroll up.
Yeah, there's one from Guy at 11:58. It says, how thick were the Woodlock doors to hold back the river?
I don't know how thick exactly the wooden lock doors were. It's hard for me to get some information on that. They did not have the dimensions for the thickness or the size of the gates, fortunately.
Another question, how does Lake Erie's big storm surges affect the Welland Canal and locking?
I do not know the answer to that question, Tom. I'm sorry, I don't know how the big storms in Lake Erie affect the Welland Canal. What do you call the water between the locks? Someone asked that earlier. I don't know. I never thought of that. I always just assumed that they're just the locks.
The canal.
I bet there's a term, but I don't know. Sorry, there's a lot of questions that were typed. I'm trying to go through them all. And then small comments. I would like to know how you get the boats into the water. How you get the boats in, okay. Miss Kretschmer, I hope I'm saying that right, and to the students of her class, the boats are constructed at shipyards, and before they're completed, I believe that they're put into the water. I'm not sure if we have, I'm pretty sure we've made a presentation on shipbuilding, and I think next week's lesson might prove interesting to the class, having to do with different types of ships and their evolution. But oh, I see that Scott actually already answered it a little bit. Yep, how they're launched. Yep, okay. Again, sorry, 1 second. There are a lot of questions and folks are already answering them in the comments. Thank you to my coworkers who are answering these questions that are quite good.
Hannah.
Yes.
I'll just relay them to you because it's a little easier for me to filter. There's one above from Paul that says, why not use the Niagara River?
Well, the Niagara Falls actually make it very, very difficult for that to happen. That's actually, so before the Welland Canal was really popping, there was the Erie Canal, which helped bypass that area. But I'd say that it is the falls that make that very difficult. It makes it just about impossible.
Michael also asked, why aren't we discussing the Erie Canal and did they miss something?
So I went through, I didn't really do too much research into the Erie Canal, considering it wasn't important to my lesson plan. But what I do know is that the Erie Canal does still exist physically, but it is not something that is like greatly utilized still. Yeah, that's the best way to answer that question, I think, for myself at least, to answer that question, as I don't know the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Are there any more
There's one from Kathleen that says, how long does it typically take to lock through all 8? Sure, sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. How long does it typically take to lock through all 8?
Oh, I had that number in my notes. I'm sorry I didn't put it into the presentation. To get through the Welland Canal, it takes, oh, I'm racking my brain. I've got a lot of numbers in here. Oh. About 12 hours, like half a day. Yes. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Scott, for answering these questions. Between 12 and 18 hours. I guess it all depends on the traffic that's going on that day, and if there are lines on a day when they can pass through pretty quickly, they don't have to wait their turn for a lock. I assume it can go pretty quick.
And then there's one more question. Why are Great Lakes locks not a standard size of 1,000 feet?
I don't know, but I will say, well, part of it has to do with, this is a loaded question. We don't really, it has to do for, I guess, like a few reasons. One is like, sorry, I don't know where I should start with this question. There are a lot of things. Yeah, many locks were created prior to the larger vessels being built. That's very true. And then even though like it's waterway no longer exists. You guys are really chatting it up in the comments. Just let you guys talk. Really expensive to upgrade locks to larger sizes. That's true. It's also really expensive to make 1,000-footers, and then sometimes it's not always profitable, especially when they can't go everywhere. So who really knows how long they'll stay around for and stuff like that. Are there any more questions that maybe I can answer? Hopefully I have a...
You're doing great, Hannah. No, there are no more questions as of right now.
All right. Let me minimize that. So after leaving Port Weller, vessels travel about 140 miles to the end of Lake Ontario and into the St. Lawrence River. This can take anywhere between 13 and 10 hours depending on their speed. So look at that, I had the answer in there. I knew I did, I just hadn't gotten to the slide yet. So from Port Weller, oh no, actually different question, excuse me. But traveling across Lake Ontario actually is a 13 to 10 hours, 140 miles. So we just went through all of the locks in the Welland Canal, and Lake Ontario has just been crossed. So now we enter the St. Lawrence River and the last stretch of our journey before we reach the ocean. Our next few stops are the Iroquois Lock, Eisenhower and Snell locks, and Boa Noir locks, and finally the Côte St. Catherine and St. Lambert locks. The Iroquois Lock is Canadian owned and operated and was fully functional in 1958. The Iroquois Lock replaced the Gdp Canal, kind of located right over here. Here goes the Iroquois Lock. Because it was, but they replaced it because it was needing to be replaced in order for the Seaway to the St. Lawrence Seaway to be constructed as they had a plan for the Seaway to have uniform dimensions for all of the new locks. The previous lock would raise and lower vessels about 15.5 feet, and surprisingly, the Iroquois Lock actually only lowers vessels about 1 foot. And they also, like I said earlier, they built that dam right there that produces electricity. It's a hydroelectric dam. But continuing on, the next checkpoint is the Eisenhower and Snell locks located on the US side of the Seaway. The Eisenhower and Snell locks were built from between 1954 to 1958 by the US Army Corps of Engineers. That's us. The Eisenhower lock was originally called the Robinson Bay Lock, but was renamed soon after Eisenhower left office. Both the Eisenhower and Snell locks are 766 feet in length, 80 feet in width, and 30 feet in depth. The only difference is that the Eisenhower lock lowers 38 feet and the Snell lock lowers 41 feet. And again, I'm going to mention these dimensions quite a few times, and that's because they all do have the uniform dimensions for all of their locks. But when headed toward the Atlantic, the Eisenhower is passed through first, and then the Snell just shortly after. Here is the Eisenhower, here is the Snell. And then after leaving the Snell, they are over halfway through with their journey to the in the St. Lawrence Seaway, and they're only about 150 feet above sea level. So leaving behind the Eisenhower and the Snell lock, the Boa Noir locks are the second to last stop before the Atlantic Ocean. The Boa Noir Canal was built in 1932 as a development of hydroelectricity. Near it, a dam and powerhouse were built, but construction on the locks didn't begin until the 1950s. And in 1959, they were officially inaugurated into the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is actually the same as all of the locks that I'm mentioning. They were all inaugurated in 1959. The locks are about 5.5 miles apart, and both have the same dimensions of 766 feet in length, 80 feet in width, and 30 feet in depth, as well as lowering and raising vessels 41 feet. And in this bottom picture, you can see where the Boa Noir is located in relation to Lake Ontario and the Atlantic, or the Gulf, St. Lawrence Gulf. Finally, when we make it to our last stop, the Côte St. Catherine and St. Lambert Lock. When approaching the two, elevation is about 75 feet above sea level. The Côte St. Catherine and St. Lambert Lock are the last set of locks, both inaugurated in 1959. They enable vessels to bypass the Lachine Rapids, I believe is how it's called. I don't actually know. When headed to the ocean, the first lock passed is Côte St. Catherine, where vessels are lowered about 30 feet, and about 8.5 miles away is the St. Lambert Lock. The St. Lambert Lock lowers vessels about 15 feet in a lock with the exact same dimensions as the previous 6. And once lowered, they've officially gone through every checkpoint needed to get to the ocean. After that, you could say it's smooth sailing. Past the St. Lambert Lock, there is only a journey up the river until salt water is reached. And right here, I have kind of pointed out all the places that we have stopped, including all of the locks and canals and Duluth and the Detroit River. So how does this all affect you and I in our normal lives? Well, since the start of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway, it has proved itself to be a great financial investment. The system has provided jobs to hundreds of thousands of people who currently depend directly or indirectly on the Seaway, both on the Canadian and American side. It has also provided jobs to thousands of people who are based in different countries. Since its official start in 1959, 2.5 billion tons in cargo. I think this is a statistic updated last in 2015, but 2.5 billion tons in cargo have been shipped between the US, Canada, and about 50 other countries. In addition, international ships make up between 3,000 and 4,000 transits a year, which comprise of at least 25% of the St. Lawrence Seaway's overall traffic. On top of providing so many jobs, the Great Lakes are an economy all on their own. The Seaway is a major driver of the North American economy, and economic output estimated at $6 trillion US dollars in 2017. So saying that all again, standalone, the Great Lakes generated $6 trillion in US dollars between the US and Canada. So to put that into perspective for many that aren't familiar with the 2017 GDP rankings, I doubt many of you are, but the United States reported about 19.4 trillion in GDP, ranking number 1. Ranking number 2 is China at 12.3 trillion, and ranking 3rd at 4.9 was Japan. So basically, if the Great Lakes region and system were its own country with its own economy, it would rank 3rd globally. So that's pretty significant considering. In 2017, 1.65 trillion was the reported GDP for Canada, which is about 3.5 times less than the 6 trillion produced by the Great Lakes region. So keeping the shipping alive is very important to all of us. So that is how they affect us all on a large scale, but how does this affect the, the international shipping, domestic shipping, Seaway impact everyday life? In addition to the hundreds of thousands of jobs, it impacts how our lives are powered. The construction of the Seaway led to the construction of many hydroelectric dams powering local communities, and it allows for us to import things like wind turbine parts, which are sent out to communities everywhere to provide green, renewable energy. So Canadian and US farmers are also have their products shipped out globally. We mentioned it earlier, but going mildly deeper into it, products like grain and wheat, which are sent out most of the time is what we see Salty's taking. But grain and wheat is produced at a great surplus in both Canada and the US. Combined, about 30.5% of the world's exported grains comes from the Great Lakes. And a little fact about that is that most of the genuine Italian pasta is made from Midwestern grains. A lot of the time when we do see Salties leaving at least Duluth with grain, we see them heading to the Mediterranean a lot. Mediterranean, Northern Africa, those are some 2 places. Domestic shipping is extremely impactful, as well as the locks give Lakers access to, say, transportation of iron ore, which provides the steel, which makes our lives 10 times easier and lets us continue forward smoothly. So thanks to the Soo locks, the Paul Archer Gertha can get from Duluth all the way to St. Clair, Michigan, where they do have a coal power plant. It also allows vessels like the Canadian Algoma to get iron ore pellets within the Duluth Superior Harbor and take it 3 lakes away to Lake Ontario, where there are steel mills in Hamilton. So while the Soo Locks and Welland Canal are important to the international ships, the Salties, using the Seaway, they are also important to the domestic boats, the Lakers, fulfilling their orders. Yeah, very important. So I'd like to hopefully get some participation. If you guys could just comment the answers to these questions using A, B, C, or D. But over 2,300 miles, vessels must rise 600 feet to get to Duluth. How do they rise? Do they rise using portaging, canals, locks, or horses? Look at that. CC locks. Yes. Good answer. Oh, that says hoses. Ignore that. But yes, in order to rise 600 feet, they use locks. The Great Lakes generated $6 trillion US in 2017. If they were a country, what would they rank? Second, third, fourth, or seventh? Got one answer, two answers. The correct answer is B. They would rank third because China still, even though the United States makes 19.4, China makes 12.3, and while Japan makes 4.9, I believe it was, the Great Lakes region makes 6. So the Duluth Canal connects blank to blank. Just connect the Earth to the Moon, Lake Erie to Lake Ontario, Lake Superior to Duluth Superior Harbor, or Duluth, Minnesota to Superior, Wisconsin. Oh, look at you guys. You're so smart. You guys answer these questions a lot better than I do. Yes, the correct answer is C. The Duluth Canal connects Lake Superior to the Duluth Superior Harbor. So why does the US ACE want to make a new lock? Is it A, to increase the PO lock, in case the PO lock is inoperable, B, speed up Soo traffic, C, compete with the Welland Canal, D, all of the above, or E and B? Got some A's, got some E. Correct answer is actually A and B. It would greatly speed up the traffic. Sometimes there are lines and vessels have to wait a little bit of time in order for others to get through. But yes, it is to, one, in case the PO lock becomes inoperable, so everything can continue as normal, and to speed up the Soo lock traffic. That is my presentation today. If you guys do have any more questions, I can answer them in just a moment. I'm going to be handing power of the PowerPoint back over to Tricia. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm sorry I couldn't answer every question, but I did try my best, and I hope my coworkers were able to pitch in and answer those for you guys. I end my stop screen sharing. There we go. All right.
Alrighty, thank you for that presentation, Hannah. That was wonderful, and I love how active the chat is today. So I just want to go over a little bit of where our visitor centers are at the moment, and then we'll go ahead and answer questions. So right now, the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center in Duluth is offering a cell phone tour outdoors. We also have the virtual online tour of the museum. We're answering questions via phone, as you heard a few times during this presentation. And then we have an online gift shop as well, the Marine Museum Gifts.com. And then the Soo Locks Visitor Center, the park is open, I believe, still from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And at this time, these measures will stay in effect until we feel safe to further open. And then for our program next week, I mentioned this earlier, we have another program coming up on the 18th, or not next week, 2 weeks from now, on the 18th, that's Centuries of Innovations, the Great Lakes Vessel Evolution. And the link there is at the bottom. On the right-hand side is all of our resources that you can access as well, the Detroit District, our Facebook pages, that YouTube page, which will show the recording about a day from now. That's all of our previous recordings as well, if you'd like to view some of our previous programs. The vessel schedule, the hotline is not active right now, but we're hoping that that'll get back up. So that's not active at this moment, as well as Harbor Lookout, because the shipping season isn't happening for a little bit here. But that is for future reference if you do need it. If you'd like to join our program email list as well, you can email hello@lsmbc@gmail.com. And as always, we'd appreciate if you'd fill out our 2-minute survey to let us know some feedback on this program and your opinion on future programs as well. So I'll leave this up for you so that you can copy those links down, and I will put the survey link as well into our chat. And then there's another question that was answered a little bit earlier, Hannah. This is from Miss Kretschmer. She says, thank you for answering all these questions. We are wondering if any boats ever sink in the shipping channels or lock systems. How do you bring food into the boat? Is there a cafe? The students are loving this.
Okay, I can answer all those three of those questions. The first question, if there are any boats that sink, was it? Here, I'll scroll up to find that question. Oh, any boats that ever sink in the shipping channel or lock system. I won't say that they sink per se, but what can happen is that it happens every now and then. But I do know that if I were to, oh, I'm not sharing, but in the, I believe it was in 2018, which is like the most recent that I can think of in the Detroit River, was that a vessel was grounded, which basically means the bottom of the boat was touching the bottom of the lake. They went into a little more shallow of an area and they were stuck there for about a day or two. So there isn't sinking really, but they do get stuck sometimes. And there have been other instances where going through the locks or the canals where there have been accidents, where there have been small collisions, larger collisions, and even with boat and boat hitting each other, or like boat and bridge, boat hitting bridge, because bridges didn't lift quick enough. How do you bring food onto the boats? Slash, is there a cafe? They do have a mess hall, you could say. There are folks that work on Lakers and Salties that are specifically like cooks. The way that Salties get their food are there are companies that exist. Oh, this is the same for Lakers actually. There are companies that exist that know where boats are going to be at certain ports, and then if the boats have requested like certain foods or certain objects, like, oh, they need, 5 things of toothpaste delivered to the Paul Archer Gertha next time it's at the Canadian National Port, they'll put everything that they need and then deliver that. I know that in Duluth, I believe the company is called like the Eloise. They are very helpful to us, letting us know when boats are going to be where boats will be and when, because they have to deliver a lot of things to the boats. Yes, but technically that's how they get their food, and they do have a cafe, I guess you could say. Are there any more questions?
There was a question that was answered earlier, but it was answered in the chat, so I don't think I need to relay that to you. Are there any additional questions that I may have missed in the active chat during this presentation? If so, go ahead and just retype them. We'll give you a moment.
I was muted. Just forget everything that I was mouthing. Doesn't matter. But Sarah, the director, as what I was saying was how she commented how there are dedicated shipping lanes for the commercial shipping boats to prevent grounding. And basically, as long as they don't stray too far away, they're okay. And those shipping lanes are always maintained constantly year round because we understand how important it is. Are there any more questions?
I don't see any more questions. I think at this time we could conclude the program because I think we were pretty thorough on the questions, which is good. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you Ranger Hannah for the presentation. As always, join us in 2 weeks for our next program at the same time and the link you see there. But otherwise, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you everyone.